Hey everyone, I'm Chris Cruz Kalari, and I want to thank all of you for a great semester. I want to thank Dr. McGraw. This particular course was a really appropriate one for me as one of my last courses in our doctoral program at St. Peter's because I've not only gotten to reflect on my career and how it relates to all of our coursework throughout the program, but for this particular course, I've been able to think about all of our coursework over the past couple years, and to apply some of that information to this course along with my career. So it's been particularly helpful and has sort of helped me to become even more forward-looking as I think about next steps for my career and the things that I'm passionate about. So my project directly relates to learning outcome number 4, which is this idea, as Dr. McGraw said, of producing a case study regarding an issue that is very important in higher education today. And for me, I think there is no more important issue, not only for higher ed, but for our country, than developmental education at open access community colleges and other kinds of open access colleges, whereby we know that 2/3 of all college students enter college not technically prepared for college level work as measured by a variety of metrics. And at the same time, a college education is now more important forever for access and sustainability into the middle class. And while a college education always provided people in the US with a greater degree of access to the middle class, to white collar jobs specifically, there was still a time for the past several generations that people could work their way into the middle class in through other means. While that's still possible, it's increasingly less likely, and there's a college imperative in the United States right now. But yet again, so many of our young people are not yet prepared. So what do we do? So, as I said, according to the research, about 2/3 of students are not necessarily ready in terms of being successful at college level coursework, whether that's in the areas of reading, writing, math, and also other kinds of behaviors. Sometimes they're called non-cognitive skills that help carry students through their college study for the long run. Indeed, only 20% of students who start in a developmental education coursework actually obtain a credential after 3 years. So many of you know that I am in the process of launching a program called READY, which is Realizing Educational Access and Development for You. And for this particular project, I reviewed the literature around successful developmental ed programs, workforce development, and economic development in our country, both now and in the future. And I also have some insight into sort of thinking about our work as leaders, and how many times the leadership in higher education, even at open access community colleges, is still tied to, and this is really relevant for this particular course, leadership is often still tied to a model of higher education that is elitist in nature, that so many higher ed leaders, including some faculty, do not embrace their open access missions, and thereby the students who are really going to need our open access colleges the most. So I hope to address all those things in the next few minutes. So the research is clear that there's 3 factors that have affected the success of students in developmental coursework and also in their success upon completion of developmental coursework, if in fact they even complete it. So the first factor is their underpreparedness for college level work. So that is their reading, writing, and or math is not where it needs to be. Secondly, a second factor that has determined the lack of success, again, in developmental education programs themselves or beyond, is ineffective pedagogy. So that is to say that the kinds of activities that students are engaged in the classroom are not the most effective in terms of building skill for immediate success and also long-term success in a higher education institution. And then a third factor, according to the research, is that students' life circumstances are pulling them away from being able to focus on their college education. And this is more pronounced among first-generation college students of all backgrounds and students of color overall, particularly African American and Latino students. So, how do we address these three factors to make a more successful developmental ed program? Well, first of all, we've got to embrace our mission, as I said earlier, and really stop trying to improve a model that is not really rooted in the best interest and success of students at open access community colleges. So the model is, the 300 plus year old concept of higher education, where there's a professor who has all the knowledge and students who have all the time, and that the professor is guiding this small group of students in this very exclusive experience called university study. So we need to have a different model in place and embrace who we are, where we're putting our students and all that they bring, all their assets, and all of their potential challenges, that we place all of that at the center and we build a program around that. And that's really what the Ready program aims to do. So that does not come easily. So we've got to, it involves a culture shift actually at the institution, and we've got to address that head on. So the first idea is to provide lots of professional development and lots of opportunities for culture change at the institution, so that your best professors, your best instructors are really digging into one of the most critically urgent issues of our time, which is how to get students in developmental education through and then successful beyond it. Okay, so a second attribute of Ready is a dynamic pedagogy. So very often in developmental education, people think, well, students are not good readers or students are not good writers, so we should have students reading very short texts, finding a main idea in that text, doing short writing assignments, possibly concentrating on, finite skills, discrete skills like grammar and the like, and that is an ineffective pedagogy. Worse yet, sometimes the course of study within those developmental ed programs that are not successful are not developmentally appropriate. That is to say that when a student is 18, 19, 20 years old and coming to a community college, or even adult learners who are coming in their 30s and 40s, students need to be engaged in relevant, current kinds of readings and activities that reflect the world around them, that students are being challenged in a rigorous but supportive setting, and where students are able to produce or attempt to produce college level work that shows deep critical thinking, even imperfectly in the beginning, but to really help students to understand that college is an exciting place, a transformative place, and it's not communicated through the teaching of discrete skills, but rather a dynamic curriculum that's current in terms of what's going on in our world around us now. What are the big challenges? How can we solve them? As well as other kinds of texts and activities that engage students on multiple levels. The third is that we really need to look at student development. So the most successful developmental ed programs, according to the research, are those that infuse student development learning into academic coursework, particularly in developmental education. So what is student development research saying? Well, that students need to feel like they matter. So this idea of creating an environment where students are not marginalized but feel that their individual lives matter to the institution, so that they're not just a number. Another is that students are engaging in high-level kinds of coursework, even students who struggle, but that they're doing it with lots of support. So it's counterintuitive to think that students again need to be engaged in sort of a basic kind of curriculum when they're in developmental ed, because they may have some skills issues. No, we need to actually engage them at high levels and with lots of support. And then the other piece of it, and this also goes back to the idea of life circumstances pulling students in other directions. So we can't solve every problem, obviously, in the college classroom that relates to a student's life, but what we can do in the context of student development is to ask students to do a lot of self-reflection about their lives, and what kinds of choices they can make and what kinds of sacrifices they can make, considering the parameters and demands on their lives. And if we can help them to carve out a little more space for their college education, then they're more likely to be successful. So the classroom in the end is language rich. It has relevance to what's going on in the world today. There is career exploration where students are examining, what their options are, what their interests are in the context of wanting to be better readers and writers and better at their math skills. And also that they're looking at general education topics within those developmental ed experiences, so that developmental ed actually feels like a slice of college life, a slice of college study in a short period of time. This idea that students are not only being remediated, but they're actually receiving leadership training. And leadership means a whole lot of different things. It's leadership within your own life, it's leadership among peers, it's leadership in a society, but really helping to students see themselves as a part of this special place called college, and that they're learning leadership skills and taking all these things into consideration. So embracing our missions as community colleges and open access schools, creating a dynamic pedagogy. Both of those things require lots of professional development and culture change at the institutional level. And then infusing the program with lots of student development, growth opportunities for students. I'm reminded of, over the past several months, we've all learned about the college admissions scandals that have shown that very wealthy people are buying their ways into America's most prestigious institutions. And so often, we've been taught, through the messages we receive in society, that people who go to the most elite institutions are the most talented, and we know that generally they will ultimately end up being the most successful. So while I don't want to take anything away from the students who've earned their way to get into the most elite institutions, we know that whether someone's bought their way in or whether they've gotten in by their own merits, but through a set of educational and personal experiences that really prepare them for those atmospheres, we know that the admissions debacle is really shining a light on the myth of a meritocracy in our country, and particularly as it relates to higher education. For generations, we've been, again, taught to believe that we need to be more like them. Even some of us in this program, our educational experiences have given us those messages. And this goes back to this idea. I raised this in the context of my final comments because this goes back to this idea of confronting our belief systems and embracing our mission, and that is really critical for higher ed leaders. That our work in open access community college is this beautifully noble and potentially transformative activity for both ourselves, our society, and our students individually, and that we need to really own that and start to challenge the narrative that suggests that the best students, historically have always done well in school, and they ultimately go to the best colleges and land positions in their field and rise to the levels of leadership in society. That narrative is only partially true. The larger narrative is that there are many more people, young people in particular, who are attending or want to attend or could attend America's community colleges, and with the right kinds of support, they can rise to the highest levels of their own goals and the highest level of their own potential. So this particular project was not only helpful for me in terms of the actual review of the of the research and scholarship, but also around issues of leadership and culture change within higher ed to really make something like this possible. And this course has certainly pointed me in the right directions around the ways of approaching that, the ways of helping faculty and staff to embrace who and what we are in open access ed for the betterment of our students. So thanks very much, everyone.